The year was 1861. The streets of Richmond, Virginia, glowed under the golden haze of the afternoon sun. Horse-drawn carriages rattled down Main Street. Soldiers in gray uniforms marched past, and the air was filled with a strange mixture of pride and fear. The city had just become the capital of the Confederate States of America. To most Southerners, it was the dawn of a new nation. But behind the white columns of a grand house on Church Hill, a woman named Elizabeth Van Lew looked out through her window and saw something else, a country tearing itself apart. Elizabeth, or Lizzie as her close friends called her, was born into privilege. Her father, John Van Lew, had been a wealthy hardware merchant, and their home was one of Richmond's most respected. Their house stood tall with elegant staircases, chandeliers from Paris, and mahogany furniture that glistened like the past itself. On the surface, the Van Lews were the image of Southern gentility, church-going, well-mannered, part of the city's elite. But Elizabeth was different from most women of her class. She carried in her mind the Northern ideas she had learned in her youth, ideas about equality, compassion, and freedom. When she was a young girl, her father sent her to school in Philadelphia, where Quaker teachers taught her that no human being should ever be enslaved. The message had stayed with her. She remembered her mother's voice warning her not to speak of such things when she returned home to Virginia. "You mustn't talk like that here, Lizzie," her mother had whispered. "People would think you've gone mad." And yet, years later, when her father passed away in 1843, Elizabeth quietly began freeing the people her family had enslaved. She could not legally do so under Virginia law, but she found ways to purchase their freedom or grant them wages and independence. She became known in hushed tones around Richmond society as that strange woman with Yankee sympathies. Now in 1861, as the thunder of war grew louder, Elizabeth found herself at a crossroads. The Confederacy was rising around her. Her neighbors hung the new rebel flag proudly on their porches. Young men marched off to join General Robert E. Lee's army. The air buzzed with excitement and vengeance. But Elizabeth's heart grew heavier with every passing day. She knew the Union, the country that her forefathers had built, was breaking apart, and she knew deep inside that she could not stay silent. It was on an early spring morning when she made her decision. Standing in her family's drawing room, the light spilling across the patterned carpet, she whispered to herself, "I will not stand by while my country dies." That single vow would change her life and make her one of the most daring spies in American history. Her first step was subtle. She began volunteering to bring food and medicine to Union soldiers imprisoned at Libby Prison, a grim red brick building on the James River where captured Northern soldiers were kept in filth and starvation. The Confederate Guards saw her as a harmless Southern lady showing charity. They had no idea that every visit she made was part of a greater plan. Inside the prison, Elizabeth met men who were sick, broken, and desperate. She would bring them blankets, fruit, letters from home, and most importantly, information. She would ask gentle questions, listen closely to what the soldiers had heard before capture. How many troops are in certain regiments? What do they know of Confederate defenses? Then she would carry those scraps of intelligence back to her house, commit them to paper in a secret code, and hide them where no one would think to look. At first, she worked alone, but soon others began to help her. One of her most trusted allies was Mary Bowser, a young black woman who had once been enslaved by the Van Lew family. Elizabeth had freed her years before and helped send her north for an education. When the war began, Mary returned to Richmond, and with Elizabeth's help, she took on one of the most dangerous missions imaginable. Mary Bowser would become a servant in the Confederate White House itself, working under President Jefferson Davis. Few in Richmond society suspected that a servant might carry a photographic memory, quietly noting the contents of documents left on the president's desk. The information Mary gathered found its way back to Elizabeth, and from there, north to Union commanders. The network grew in secret. Couriers disguised as peddlers and delivery boys carried messages hidden in hollowed-out eggs, baked loaves of bread, or silk seams of dresses. Elizabeth devised an intricate cipher system, a series of dots and dashes that looked like ordinary punctuation, but contained critical details about Confederate troop movements. She smuggled these notes through lines of spies all the way to General Ulysses S. Grant himself. Every day carried the risk of death. Confederate counterintelligence officers were everywhere, and rumors of Yankee sympathizers spread like wildfire. Elizabeth's own neighbors began to suspect her eccentric behavior. She often acted confused in public, speaking nonsense to throw people off. The locals nicknamed her Crazy Bet. She smiled when she heard it. Let them think her mad, she thought. It was the best disguise she could have. At night, when the city quieted and the gas lamps flickered outside her windows, Elizabeth would sit alone in her study, writing in her cipher, her pen trembling slightly. Outside, the wind carried the distant sound of drums. The war was moving closer. She knew that if she were caught, there would be no mercy. Yet she continued night after night, trusting only in her wits and courage. Sometimes she would think of the world before the war, the grand dinners, the music, the laughter echoing through Richmond's parlors. That world was gone now, swallowed by cannon fire and blood. But even in the darkness, she felt a strange peace. She had chosen her path. As 1862 dawned, Richmond was full of spies, soldiers, and suspicion. But none of them guessed that behind one of the most respected names in the city stood the beating heart of the Union's secret network. And somewhere across the lines, in a tent lit by lanterns, Union generals began receiving mysterious, accurate intelligence that no one could explain. Elizabeth Van Lew had become a ghost in her own city, a woman living between two worlds, pretending loyalty to one cause while secretly serving another. And this was only the beginning of her story.
The year was 1862, and Richmond had become a fortress. Everywhere Elizabeth looked, there were soldiers in gray, officers on horseback, and guards watching every corner. The Confederate capital was alive with tension. Food was scarce, suspicion hung in the air, and the sound of military drums echoed through the cobblestone streets. For Elizabeth Van Lew, it was the perfect place to disappear. Her reputation as Crazy Bet had begun to spread. She played her part well, wandering through markets, muttering nonsense, confusing her neighbors with strange habits, and laughing at things that weren't there. People began to avoid her, whispering that she had lost her mind. But beneath that careful disguise, Elizabeth was sharper than ever. Every word she spoke, every smile she gave, was calculated. Her apparent madness was her mask, the perfect cover for a woman running the most dangerous spy network in the Confederacy. Inside her grand old house on Churchill, the real work began. Her parlor, once used for parties and piano music, was now a command center. Maps of Virginia lay hidden beneath tablecloths. Letters were burned after reading. Trusted messengers came and went under the guise of servants or merchants. Elizabeth had turned her home into the beating heart of the Union's intelligence network in the South. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Elizabeth sat by a candle with Mary Bowser beside her. Mary's eyes sparkled with courage. She had returned to Richmond under false papers, pretending to be an illiterate servant. In truth, she was highly educated, fluent, and possessed a remarkable memory. She could glance at a document and recall every word. Mary's new post was extraordinary. Through Elizabeth's social connections, she was placed inside the Confederate White House, working directly in President Jefferson Davis's household. Every day she dusted his office, served tea to visiting generals, and silently memorized the contents of military reports left on his desk. At night, she would quietly slip away, meeting one of Elizabeth's couriers at a predetermined spot near the market. There, she would whisper what she had seen. 2 divisions ordered to move south next week. New artillery shipment delayed. Lee plans to reinforce the lines near Petersburg. Those words, passed from hand to hand through Elizabeth's network, would travel hundreds of miles to reach the Union Army. Elizabeth's network was a masterpiece of deception. She trained her couriers to act as ordinary vendors, selling milk, eggs, or bread, while carrying hidden compartments full of coded notes. She used invisible ink made from lemon juice, and messages were often concealed in the false bottoms of baskets or hollowed-out eggshells. To outsiders, she seemed like a lonely, eccentric woman with too much time on her hands. But inside that madness, she was running one of the most efficient espionage systems of the Civil War. Even the Union generals up north began to rely on her intelligence. One day, a Union scout named David Bell Birney received a strange package wrapped in silk. Inside was a small scrap of paper covered with random dots and dashes. He handed it to a Union code officer who soon recognized the cipher. It was from B. Only one person signed her messages that way: Elizabeth Van Lew. Her notes contained detailed sketches of Confederate fortifications, the exact positions of cannons, and troop counts. Grant's men used this information to plan raids and anticipate Confederate movements. Behind enemy lines, Elizabeth's invisible hand was shaping the course of the war. But danger grew closer each week. Confederate counterintelligence agents began hearing whispers about a lady spy in Richmond. People were arrested, questioned, sometimes never seen again. One of Elizabeth's couriers was caught and beaten before managing to escape. Another disappeared without trace. Still, she refused to stop. "If I falter now," she told her mother one night, "then all those men suffering in Libby prison will die in vain." Her mother looked at her daughter's pale face and trembling hands. "You'll be caught, Lizzie," she said softly. Elizabeth smiled faintly. "Then I shall die for my country." The following months were the most dangerous of her life. Confederate officers began searching houses for traitors. One afternoon, soldiers came to her door. She greeted them with exaggerated cheer, acting confused. "Oh, dear me, have I done something wrong again?" Her wide eyes and erratic speech convinced the soldiers she was harmless. They laughed and left. But the moment they were gone, Elizabeth's knees nearly gave out. She had been minutes from exposure. By 1863, her network was fully operational. Dozens of people, men, women, free blacks, and even enslaved workers were part of her silent army. They risked everything for the promise of a united America. At night, they met in secret barns and shadowed alleys, passing notes that could change battles. Mary Bowser continued her perilous role, pretending to be invisible inside the Confederate president's house. She once overheard Davis discussing the movement of troops toward Gettysburg. That information, transmitted through Elizabeth's cipher, reached the Union command just in time to prepare defenses. Historians would later call it one of the most valuable leaks of the entire war. But it wasn't just intelligence that Elizabeth provided. She also organized prison escapes. She bribed guards, arranged safe houses, and guided Union soldiers through secret routes out of Richmond. Some she hid temporarily in her attic, feeding them until it was safe to move. Her house became a lifeline for the desperate and wounded. Each night as she extinguished her lamp, she would whisper a silent prayer, not for her own safety, but for the survival of the Union. "If God wills me to die," she once wrote in her diary, "let it be in the service of my country." Outside, Richmond burned with the fever of war. Newspapers shouted of victories and vengeance. But somewhere in that proud Confederate capital, a quiet woman in silk and lace continued to unravel its secrets, one coded letter at a time. Her mission was far from over. The war was turning. The Union was tightening its grip. And soon, very soon, her work would decide the fate of Richmond itself.
By the spring of 1864, the war had dragged into its fourth bloody year. The once proud Confederate capital of Richmond was growing desperate. The streets that once rang with laughter and music now echoed with the rumble of wagon wheels carrying wounded men, the cries of hungry children, and the dull thud of distant artillery. The city was starving. Supplies from the South were dwindling, and the Union Army, under General Ulysses S. Grant, was closing in like an iron fist. Inside her old mansion on Church Hill, Elizabeth Van Lew could feel the city trembling. She had lived every moment of the war from behind enemy lines, her quiet home a sanctuary for secret meetings, coded letters, and frightened men on the run. But now, as the Confederacy began to crumble, the danger reached its highest peak. The closer victory came, the more perils she faced. The Confederate authorities were growing paranoid. Spies had been discovered and hanged in the public square. A single whisper of treason could mean imprisonment or worse. Soldiers searched homes at random, ripping up floorboards and emptying drawers. Neighbors reported on neighbors. Elizabeth knew it was only a matter of time before someone pointed at her door. Still, she did not stop. Her network, what remained of it, was her lifeline. Some of her couriers had fled the city or been caught, but others, brave and loyal, continued their work. And Mary Bowser, the brilliant woman inside the Confederate White House, was still sending precious information. Late one night, as thunder rolled over the James River, a messenger arrived at Elizabeth's door soaked with rain. He carried a note written in her own cipher. Davis preparing to flee. Confederate lines weak near the river. Elizabeth read the message twice, her heart pounding. She understood immediately what it meant. The Confederacy was on the brink of collapse. She worked by candlelight through the night, decoding, writing, and preparing one final report. In the morning, a milk vendor, a man loyal to her cause, would carry that message north, disguised as an ordinary delivery. It would eventually reach Union General Benjamin Butler and then General Grant. Within hours of receiving it, Grant would act. Days later, the skies above Richmond turned black with smoke. Grant's army pressed south and east, cutting off the Confederate supply lines. From her window, she could see the glow of distant fires. Refugees fled through the streets. Panic spread like wildfire. Confederate soldiers rushed to defend the city, but they were exhausted and starving. By early April 1865, the end was at hand. President Jefferson Davis and his cabinet gathered their belongings and fled southward, carrying with them the last hopes of the Confederacy. The night they left, Richmond erupted in chaos. Confederate troops set fire to tobacco warehouses and armories to prevent them from falling into Union hands. The flames leapt from building to building until the entire city seemed to burn.
Elizabeth watched from her balcony as the city she had known all her life was consumed by fire. The sky glowed red, ash drifted through the air, and the sound of explosions shook the ground. She could hear women screaming, horses panicking, and church bells tolling through the smoke. Yet even amid the destruction, she felt an overwhelming calm. She knew that this was the end, not only of the war, but of an old, broken world built on slavery and hate. At dawn, the streets were filled with silence. The Confederate Army had abandoned Richmond. The city lay in ruins, its people terrified, its leaders gone. Then, in the distance, came the steady tramp of boots. Union soldiers were entering the city. Elizabeth ran to her attic, where she had hidden an old folded flag, the Stars and Stripes, the flag of the United States. For 4 long years it had remained hidden, wrapped carefully in cloth, waiting for this moment. Now, with trembling hands, she carried it down to her garden. The neighbors watched from their windows in disbelief as she stepped outside, smoke swirling around her dress. There, on the morning of April 3, 1865, Elizabeth Van Lew raised the American flag over Richmond, the first time it had flown there since the war began. Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at the symbol of the Union, fluttering above the ruined city. Some neighbors cursed her from their porches, calling her a traitor. Others watched silently, unsure whether to hate or admire her. But Elizabeth didn't care. She had waited for this day through years of danger and sacrifice. Union soldiers soon reached her street. When they saw the flag already waving above her home, they were astonished. One officer later wrote that it was as though an angel had gone before us and planted the banner of victory. When they learned who she was, the soldiers greeted her with respect and gratitude. Word spread quickly through the ranks. This eccentric Richmond woman had been their invisible ally all along. In the following days, chaos gave way to order. President Abraham Lincoln himself visited the city, walking its streets quietly, humbly, without guards. When she met him, he clasped her hand warmly and said, "You have been a true friend to your country, Miss Van Lew." She never forgot those words. But even as Union troops celebrated, Elizabeth knew her battle was not over. The Confederacy had fallen, but her own world was about to change again. Richmond was a defeated city, and its people were filled with bitterness. Those who had once tolerated her eccentric ways now saw her as the embodiment of betrayal. They whispered behind her back, spat at her name, and vowed revenge. Still, on that April morning, as the smoke cleared and the flag rippled in the breeze, Elizabeth stood tall. She had kept her promise. She had risked everything, her fortune, her home, her life, and she had helped preserve the Union. But the war had cost her more than she realized. The world would move on. New battles would be fought. New heroes celebrated. For Elizabeth Van Lew, the years ahead would bring loneliness, poverty, and silence. Yet as the city rebuilt itself from ashes, one truth could not be erased. The most dangerous spy in the Confederacy had never fired a bullet, never carried a sword, and yet she had changed the course of the war.
The war was over. The Union had triumphed. The Confederate banners were torn down, and the long night of slavery had finally ended. Richmond, the proud capital of the Confederacy, lay in ruins, burned, broken, and humiliated. But for Elizabeth Van Lew, victory came with a bitter aftertaste. In the days following the surrender, she became a symbol. Some saw her as a heroine, others as a traitor. Her neighbors avoided her, whispering venom when she passed. "There goes the Yankee witch," some muttered. Shopkeepers refused to serve her. children threw stones at her gate. The city that had once respected her family's name now treated her as an outcast. Still, Elizabeth did not regret what she had done. She had served her country, not for fame or fortune, but because it was right. The Union had survived, and slavery, the great moral wound of America, was abolished. Yet as peace settled across the land, the country she had helped save seemed to forget her. In the years after the war, she continued to live quietly in her old home on Church Hill. The mansion was falling apart, its paint fading, its furniture sold piece by piece to pay her bills. Her wealth, once vast, had vanished. She had spent every penny of her inheritance funding her secret network, buying supplies, bribing guards, sheltering fugitives. Now she lived almost entirely alone, surviving on small kindnesses and the occasional gift from those who remembered her sacrifices. President Ulysses S. Grant never forgot her. When he became president, he appointed her Postmaster of Richmond, a position she held for several years. For a time, it brought her stability and also renewed hatred from her Confederate neighbors. Many refused to accept mail from her hand. Some publicly tore up letters she delivered. But she carried on, her back straight, her voice steady, never lowering her head. Mary Bowser, her brilliant spy inside the Confederate White House, had vanished after the war. Some said she escaped north, others that she changed her name to protect herself. Elizabeth never revealed her whereabouts. The secrets they had shared were buried deeper than any archive could reach. To her dying day, she guarded Mary's identity like sacred treasure. As the decades passed, the world changed. New generations came, and the memory of the war began to fade. Richmond rebuilt itself, its burned buildings replaced with bustling streets and brick houses. But the name Elizabeth Van Lew became a ghost story whispered in corners. To some, she remained a villain who betrayed her city. To others, she was a madwoman who had imagined her heroics. Few knew the truth. One winter, near the end of her life, Elizabeth received a letter from a Union soldier who had once benefited from her work. He wrote simply, "Madam, I am alive today because of you. The nation owes you more than it can ever repay." She read the letter over and over, tears slipping down her face. It was a small acknowledgement, but to her, it meant everything. By the 1890s, she was frail and nearly penniless. Her hair, once gold, had turned to silver. Her mansion decayed around her. Ivy climbed the walls and the garden grew wild. But her mind remained sharp. She often spoke to visitors about the ideals of liberty and justice, her blue eyes burning with the same quiet fire she had during the war. In 1900, at the age of 81, Elizabeth Van Lew died quietly in her home. Only a handful of people attended her funeral. There were no parades, no official honors, no speeches. She was buried in Shockoe Hills Cemetery beneath a simple headstone paid for by the few friends who remained loyal to her. For years, her grave was neglected, overgrown, forgotten. But time, as it often does, slowly began to reveal the truth. Historians unearthed her letters and diaries. They decoded her ciphers, pieced together her secret network, and discovered the vast scale of her work. They realized that Elizabeth Van Lew had been one of the most effective and daring spies of the entire Civil War. The government eventually recognized her as a key intelligence asset for the Union Army. Her reports, historians found, had shaped General Grant's strategy in the final campaigns. One scholar wrote, "Without her eyes inside Richmond, the war might have lasted far longer." Today, the Van Lew mansion is gone, but a small plaque marks the site.
Visitors who stop there often read the inscription and shake their heads in wonder. Few can believe that one eccentric, unmarried woman living in the heart of the enemy capital once ran one of the most successful spy operations in American history. Her story is not of glory or reward, but of conviction. She fought not with weapons, but with wit and courage. She risked everything she had, her name, her freedom, her life, for a country that would forget her for decades. But history, in its slow and patient way, gave her justice. Today she stands beside the great heroes of the Union, not on the battlefield, but in the shadows, where intelligence and bravery quietly win wars. And perhaps if you walk through the old streets of Richmond on a quiet evening, you might still feel her presence, the woman they once called Crazy Bet, standing tall in the face of hatred, the stars and stripes fluttering in the smoke above her. She reminds us that not all heroes carry swords. Some carry secrets. Some fight their wars alone. And some, like Elizabeth Van Lew, change the course of history, one silent act at a time.